In July, I made preliminary predictions for the 2022 FIFA World Cup using the Telegraph's predictor tool, and now the time has come for me to share my finalized predictions of the biggest sporting event on the planet, even though some are bound to be horribly wrong. Despite this, I will do my best to predict how the 22nd World Cup will unfold. After I am done analyzing the groups and predicting the order teams will finish in, I'm gonna show predictions for the knockout stage as well. But don't skip to that part of the video without first hearing my analysis of the groups. I cannot stress that enough. Otherwise, some of these predictions might seem crazy, even crazier than they already are. Also, I'm gonna increase the risk of this video aging like milk by also predicting each award in the tournament, like the top goal scorer, best goalkeeper, and so on. I will also include specific score lines for every match. Predictions in general are heavily opinionated, so you will likely not agree with all of them. You might even oppose some of these predictions so much that they offend you on a deeply personal level. But instead of disliking the video and commenting that I should end my life or something, I suggest that you post your own predictions in the comment section. It's worth noting that most of the final squads won't be submitted until in November, but if I start working on this video as late as then, it won't be finished in time. Still, I doubt the selection of one specific player over another will have a major effect on the outcome of the World Cup. We still have a good idea of what the squads will be, as well as their strength, which is what matters the most. However, note that it might mean one of my predicted goal scorers won't be at the World Cup, but it's still kinda unlikely. Regardless what happens, this video is just for fun and shouldn't be taken too seriously, even though I of course want to make informed and accurate predictions. I hope you enjoy the video. Let's start with Group A. On the 20th of November, Ecuador and host Qatar kick off the World Cup in Al-Khor. Those two are accompanied by the Netherlands and Senegal, making for an intriguing group. Despite playing on home soil, Qatar undoubtedly comes into the tournament as underdogs, due to being the weakest team in the group. A reason to be optimistic is their third place finish at the 2021 Arab Cup though. However, does it really mean that much in this scenario? Ecuador finished fourth in the infamously competitive CONMEBOL qualifiers, while Senegal are defending African champions, and the Netherlands recently convincingly topped their Nations League A group. It's worth noting that Qatar are reigning Asian champions, but they won that title well over 3 years ago, whereas Senegal were victorious in the AFCON earlier this year. Qatar have undoubtedly declined since their Asian Cup triumph, highlighted by their many poor recent results. In fact, you might remember that Qatar were paired up with Group A of the UEFA qualifiers, becoming an unofficial part of that group. This is how Qatar performed in it. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, as you can see, I've posted this on Twitter, so if you want to see cool things like these, I suggest you follow me at nteamfootball. Now back to the video. As hosts and World Cup debutants, it's possible that Qatar exceed expectations in November. Let's not forget that Russia did just that in 2018. However, Qatar are weaker than that Russian side, and have a more competitive group. At best, Qatar will obtain 1 to 3 points, which won't be enough to reach the knockout stage. Unfortunately for Qatar, they appear likely to break the unflattering record set by South Africa in 2010, by becoming the new worst performing World Cup host of all time. Having missed out on the 2018 World Cup, the Netherlands are making a long overdue return to football's greatest stage. The Dutch should be able to top the group, even though they face quite stern competition from Ecuador and Senegal. Regardless, Oranje are stronger on paper and have proven more recently, winning their Nations League A group while beating neighbours Belgium home and away in the process. Louis van Gaal has done a good job in his third stint at the helm of the Dutch national team. Though highly unlikely, it's not impossible that Ecuador will be replaced by Chile or Peru at the World Cup, following accusations that defender Byron Castillo wasn't eligible to represent La Tri in the World Cup qualifiers. FIFA rejected Chile's appeal, dismissing the argument that Castillo was actually Colombian. However, Chile and Peru are planning to take their appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, who will have made their decision by November 10th. Nevertheless, Ecuador will probably remain at the World Cup, per FIFA's initial ruling. Regardless, Chile and Peru would likely perform about as well as Ecuador at this World Cup, meaning these predictions won't be affected no matter what conclusion the CAS reaches. Distinguishing Ecuador and Senegal is trickier than one might think. Senegal are undoubtedly stronger on paper, even though Ecuador also has some good players. However, Ecuador's ELO rating is actually quite significantly higher than Senegal's. Still, that could be attributed to Ecuador being particularly great during the early stages of the World Cup qualifiers. Towards the end, their results become more underwhelming, meaning their higher rating is arguably a bit inflated. Not to mention that ELO ratings are far from being an exact science. The tiebreaker that brings Senegal over the edge is that they have more recent experience at the World Cup, participating in 2018 and being denied a place in the last 16 by the smallest possible margin. Additionally, they slightly outperformed Ecuador in the friendlies leading up to the World Cup. Despite England's struggles in the Nations League where they suffered relegation from the top division, the Three Lions should be able to top the group, as they are still stronger than any other team in it. Their Nations League group was tougher than this one, much tougher. Still, it won't be easy. An upset against England is well within the realm of possibility, given their recent underwhelming form. A very plausible scenario is that England performs similarly to how they did at Euro 2020, narrowly winning 2 matches and drawing 1 in the group. The elephant in the room of this group is Iran. FIFA have been asked to suspend the Iranian Football Association due to their regime's discrimination of women and violent crackdowns on anti-government protests. However, I don't think that Iran will be expelled from the World Cup, meaning these predictions are still applicable. It would be too chaotic for FIFA's liking, especially since the tournament is less than a month away. It would also raise the question of whether other countries that discriminate against women should be allowed, such as Saudi Arabia or host Qatar. Again, too chaotic for FIFA's liking, especially with the World Cup starting so soon. The fight for second place is open-ended, with Iran, the United States and Wales all having realistic chances of advancing, a fact further reflected in their even ELO ratings. Something that bodes well for Iran is the recent managerial reappointment of Carlos Queiroz, who almost guided the Iranians to the knockout stage from a highly competitive group at the 2018 World Cup. This time Iran's prospects look even more promising, as the likes of Portugal and Spain don't stand in their way. Also, Iran has picked up some solid results in their most recent international window, drawing with Senegal and notably defeating Uruguay 1-0. Contrastingly, the United States had an awful international break, failing to score a single goal as they were eclipsed by Japan and drew with Saudi Arabia. Friendlies should arguably be taken with a grain of salt, but at the end of the day they're football matches like any other, and decently indicative of a team's current strength. It's not as if the US fielded their C team in those games. Manager Greg Berhalter has some impressive accolades with the Americans, winning both the Gold Cup and CONCACAF Nations League during his stint. Still, it seems he has overstayed his welcome, as America's results have become poor recently. They were also a bit inconsistent throughout the CONCACAF Nations League this season and the World Cup qualifiers, especially during the latter stages. Too inconsistent to give them a good chance to reach the knockout stage of this World Cup. Just like England, neighbouring Wales most recently participated in the UEFA Nations League A. Even though the Dragons were relegated and only obtained a single point, their display gives them reasons to be optimistic heading into the World Cup. The reason being is that they found the back of the net in 5 out of 6 matches against strong opposition such as Belgium, the Netherlands and Poland. It's also worth noting that Wales are making a return for the World Cup for the first time in 64 years, which can give them the extra motivation needed to secure a spot in the last 16. Still, such fuzzy and arguably superstitious arguments should be taken with a grain of salt. They shouldn't be thrown around all willy-nilly. The US and Wales are slightly better than Iran on paper, even though there are some noteworthy Iranian players too, like Taremi at Porto, who's cheering up the Champions League, but the Middle Eastern side have proven to be more complete and cohesive under Carlos Queiroz, meaning they should be marginally favored to clinch second place. The undisputed favorite to top Group C is Argentina, as they performed great in the infamously competitive South American qualifiers, and by far possess the strongest squad in the group. If that wasn't enough, they won the 2021 Copa America. Contrastingly, Saudi Arabia will most likely finish last. That said, they shouldn't be underestimated. Playing in Qatar will essentially give them home advantage at the World Cup. It's also worth noting that the Saudi Professional League is paused ahead of the World Cup, meaning many of the players will be more well rested than others. Additionally, the Saudi Arabians are usually pretty tough to break down, as highlighted by their recent displays in friendlies, which saw them go undefeated, albeit winless, against Ecuador and the US. It was also shown in 2018, where they beat Egypt and only lost 1-0 against Uruguay. In fairness, they also lost 5-0 to host Russia, but that was a rare implosion. Regardless, these factors will likely only mitigate the margin with which Saudi Arabia are defeated. Even if they pick up an unexpected win or point, it won't be enough to advance. Mexico and Poland are almost impossible to distinguish, reflected in their almost identical ELO ratings. However, Mexico's FIFA ranking is nearly 100 points higher than that of Poland. Make of that what you will, depending on which type of rankings you value more. Poland are a bit stronger than Mexico on paper though. The Mexicans always reach the round of 16, but maybe that trend will end this World Cup. Meanwhile, Poland have flopped in the two most recent major tournaments. None of these factors might matter in Qatar, but the point is that there are fair cases for both Mexico and Poland to reach the knockout stage. It's basically a coin toss. Apart from being eerily similar to Group C in 2018, Group D notably features the defending world champions France, along with a Danish side that has proven so much throughout these last years that they can be considered a genuine title contender and not merely a dark horse. The group is rounded off by Australia and Tunisia, both of whom are unlikely to advance. Their main hope is if the so-called Champions Curse again does its magic on France and eliminates them in the group stage. However, that's unlikely to be the case. Firstly, the French squad is amazing and younger than the average Champions Curse victim. Secondly, France has already been given a wake-up call by almost being relegated in the Nations League, and also by being eliminated on penalties against Switzerland of the last Euros. Finally, France's group is slightly weaker than the average Champion Curse victim group, though by a very narrow margin. It's still not an easy one. I go more in depth on this in this video, which I highly recommend you check out if you haven't already. However, France still shouldn't be favored to win the group. That honor ought to belong to Denmark, who defeated Le Bleu home and away in the Nations League. One might argue those results should be taken with a grain of salt, since the Nations League is not taken as seriously as the World Cup. Then again, surely it's a bad sign if France loses twice to a Danish team that doesn't care. In other words, using that logic is a bit of a non-argument. Additionally, Denmark managed a draw against the French in 2018 and have only gotten stronger since then. To be fair, it was a goalless draw and it was a result that favored them both, but still, not to mention that Denmark also outperformed France in the World Cup qualifiers. France may very well get their acts together in Qatar, but heading into the competition, the Danes will be favored. Denmark is a real World Cup contender, and it will be interesting to see how far they can go. They haven't been this good since 1986. Tunisia, having recently won the Kirin Cup with victories over Chile and Japan, cannot be underestimated. They will probably finish ahead of Australia, who have been in poor form recently, despite holding Peru to a draw to secure their World Cup ticket. Other than that, the Australians have little reason to be optimistic, obtaining just one more point than Oman in the World Cup qualifiers, and finishing a whole 7 points behind Japan. In fairness, Australia are still quite tricky to break down, but Tunisia are marginally superior. They're also a bit better on paper. Germany and Spain are the frontrunners of Group E, with possible contention coming from a solid Japanese side. Costa Rica appear unlikely to repeat their great 2014 run, due to declining since then and how competitive this group is. Spain marginally outperformed Germany in the Nations League, albeit in a group which was a bit easier than that of Die Mannschaft. The invert was true when it came to the 2022 World Cup qualifiers. However, what brings La Roja over the edge is that they enjoy a higher ELO rating and greater success in recent international competitions, including the two most recent Nations League seasons and the European Championship. As previously mentioned, Costa Rica are unlikely to repeat their 2014 Cinderella run, as the competition is just too stern. The Costa Ricans are almost always tricky to break down, but they're still unlikely to obtain more than 1 point in such a competitive group. It's not 2014 anymore. Germany and Spain are both significantly stronger for obvious reasons, while Japan have a slightly higher ELO rating and stronger players, excluding the seemingly immortal Keylor Navas. Unfortunately for Costa Rica, Navas will probably just limit the margin with which they are defeated. Japan cannot be underestimated. Don't forget that they almost eliminated the 2018 World Cup bronze medalists, Belgium, 4 years ago. Pair this with a German team who have been struggling throughout the last few years, and you have the recipe for an upset. However, Germany being eliminated in the group stage of 2 consecutive World Cups is almost inconceivable. Then again, sometimes inconceivable things do happen. Nevertheless, even though it likely won't be straightforward, Germany should be able to clinch the runner-up spot. Despite their poor Nations League display, it's still probably better than what Japan would have been able to achieve in such an absurdly competitive group, though by a very small margin. Additionally, Die Mannschaft are better on paper. Finally, while Hansi Flick has struggled during his reign at Germany's helm, at least the most recent ones, not when he was Löw's right-hand man, or whatever you want to call it. He has previously proven to be a very potent coach, most notably at Bayern München, of course. Heading into the World Cup, Germany should be favoured to finish in second, but Japan reaching the knockout stage is well within the realm of possibility. Group F is arguably the most intriguing of this World Cup, featuring Belgium in what may very well be their last chance to win a major title, at least for this golden generation. Canada, playing in their first World Cup since 1986, can also be found here. Then there's of course Croatia, who reached the final of the last World Cup and are a prime example of a generational transition gone right. Finally, there's Morocco, who played really well at the 2018 World Cup, but just didn't have the margins on their side, so it will be interesting to see how well they can do now. The top spots will most likely be occupied by Belgium and Croatia, even though Canada and Morocco have the ability to cause upsets. Croatia topped a difficult Nations League group, obtaining 3 more points than Belgium, who lost twice against the Netherlands. Also, the Belgians and Croats enjoyed similarly solid performances in the World Cup qualifiers. The thing the Red Devils have going for them is their higher ELO rating, slightly superior players, and the fact that this golden generation always does well in the group stages of major tournaments. In fact, their only non-win in the group stage throughout these last 8 years was against Italy in 2016, a really impressive record. Then again, Croatia have experienced similar group stage success in this time, though to a slightly lesser extent. There are fair cases for both Belgium and Croatia to clinch the top spot, but given the better form shown in the Nations League, the Croatians should be marginally favored. However, Belgium should still be able to reach the knockout stage, as they simply are better than Canada and Morocco. Distinguishing Canada and Morocco is no easy matter, with their similar ELO ratings and comparably strong players. Canada are making a return to the World Cup for the first time since 1986. One could argue that this will give them extra motivation, which just makes them eclipse Morocco, but it's a bit of a non-argument. It's a bit unreasonable to use a lack of experience as an argument in favor of a team. What's more probable is that Morocco's more recent World Cup experience gives them a slight edge over the Canadians, even though their 2022 squad won't be the same as the 2018 one. Another group which is eerily similar to one from the last World Cup. As competitive as it is, Brazil should be able to win it. On top of enjoying the group's strongest squad and highest ELO rating, the Brazilians have topped all of their World Cup groups since 1982. The fight for second place will likely be fought between Serbia and Switzerland, even though Cameroon are no pushovers. Regardless, the Serbs and Swiss enjoy higher ELO ratings and stronger squads, meaning the indomitable Lions will probably finish in fourth. It's difficult to compare the Nations League displays of Serbia and Switzerland since they played in different divisions. Serbia won a strong group in League B with 13 points, while Switzerland finished third in Group A2 with a point tally of 9. It's fair to consider these performances equal. To be fair, it's more impressive to beat Spain as Switzerland did, as opposed to just Norway, Slovenia and Sweden like Serbia. However, the Serbs can only play what's in front of them, and they've proven that they can compete with the very best by trumping Portugal away in the World Cup qualifiers. In other words, it's basically a coin toss whether Serbia or Switzerland will advance to the knockout stage, which is further reflected in their ELO ratings and potent players. Additionally, Serbia and Switzerland enjoyed equally successful displays in the World Cup qualifiers, unexpectedly topping their groups ahead of traditional powerhouses. They're both dark horses, and it's a shame that one of them won't be in the last 16. On paper, Portugal is undoubtedly the strongest team in the group, but they often fail to come together as a team, most notably missing out on these most recent Nations League finals at the last hurdle, and failing to make it far into the two most recent major tournaments, excluding the 2019 Nations League. They've often had to face strong teams, but they should still be able to do better. That said, they are still really good and should be able to top the group ahead of Uruguay, which is further reflected in Acelesao's slightly higher ELO rating. Don't get me wrong though, Uruguay are really good and can definitely finish ahead of Portugal, but I think Portugal will just narrowly edge it out. Since 2010 onward, Uruguay have always done well at the World Cup group stage. However, all trends end at some point. A thing that doesn't bode well for Uruguay is that a lot of their key players are getting old, even though La Celeste has some good young blood as well. But as previously mentioned, I think Portugal will just edge it out. Nevertheless, Uruguay should still be able to finish ahead of Ghana and South Korea, given the South American side's superior squad and performances, excluding the notable hiccup against Iran. Ghana or South Korea could shock the Uruguayans, so it's by no means set and done. But La Celeste should still be favored heading into the World Cup. They're still good. Distinguishing Ghana and South Korea is tricky. Contrastingly, Ghana are a bit better on paper, while South Korea have a much higher ELO rating. The thing that brings the Koreans over the edge is that they are in somewhat better form heading into the competition, not to mention possessing the talismanic Heung-min Son. That concludes my group stage predictions. Now on to the knockout stage. Oh boy. Yes, I know you see some spicy predictions that may upset you and make you want to leave an angry comment, but please listen to my explanations before you do anything of that nature. I'm just gonna read top to bottom, left to right, until we're at the final, starting with the round of 16. Right, Netherlands against Iran. Netherlands are really good in the Nations League, so I think they will win, but only 1-0 because Iran are very cohesive and tough to break down. Next up, Argentina against France in the round of 16, when arguably this should be the final. A replay of a last 16 tie from 2018, which was spectacular. France won it 4-3. This time, I think the tides will turn and that Argentina will win. I was going back and forth between 1-0 and 2-0. I ultimately decided 2-0 because I just think Argentina are that good, and I think France are a bit lacking in motivation. But it's not like 2-0 is a demolition. I think it would be a pretty even game. Right, Spain against Belgium, really tricky, but I ultimately went with Spain winning on penalties, simply because I think it's their time now. They're improving more, while, I mean, Belgium's time is running out, even though I think they have become a bit of a talent factory as opposed to being a very average football team like they have been throughout a lot of history, not all, but a big amount. I actually really like Belgium, but I think Spain will narrowly edge Belgium out. Brazil against Uruguay. Uruguay have improved since their quite poor performances against Brazil in the World Cup qualifiers, but I still think that Brazil will get a relatively comfortable win. All right, next, England against Senegal. 1-0 England, it seems like they always do. I think it's going to be a pretty dull game. But I can definitely see Maguire scoring from a corner kick or something, heading it in. So 1-0 England is what I'm going to go with. I think they are slightly better than Senegal, even though Senegal obviously have some good players too. Next, Denmark-Poland. I'm pretty spicy and went with 4-1 Denmark here. But I realize it might be a bit disrespectful to Poland. But the thing with Denmark is that sometimes they just win 4-0 or 4-1. It just happens. We saw it twice at the Euros, and we've also seen it in the previous tournaments historically too. So I would not be surprised. I think Denmark will win at least one match of this World Cup 4-0 or 4-1. I think they are a bit better than Poland, even though Poland, of course, has some good players. Next, arguably a spicy prediction, but some of you probably don't even consider this an upset, which... I am one of those people. Croatia 1-0 against Germany. They got that scoreline at France and Denmark in the Nations League, which is really impressive. And Germany lost 1-0 against Hungary in the same competition. So I would not consider this an upset. Germany they are a bit better on paper, but they just failed to come together as a team, even under Hansi Flick. But I mean, it's very possible. Maybe he sorts Germany out for this World Cup and things are clicking for them now. But for now, I just think Croatia they have proven to be a bit better. Straight up, just a bit better. They're a prime example of a generational shift gone right. It's many people thought they were finished after the World Cup, but they've just went from clarity to clarity. All right, Portugal against Serbia, a replay of a World Cup qualifier, which Serbia won, shockingly. But I think that Portugal's more experience at major tournaments will just come in clutch during extra time, and that they will scrape past Serbia. But yeah, this is really a close encounter. And Croatia and Serbia in the quarterfinals would of course be epic, but I don't think it will happen. Speaking of the quarterfinals, let's get to the first one. Netherlands-Argentina. Really close match. The Netherlands, they had the best Nations League display out of any European team. And Argentina, Copa America champions, great players and experience. And I think that additional experience is what will bring them over the edge in the shootout. Not to mention they have goalkeeper Martinez. And I think he will be a hero in the shootout and make sure Argentina reaches the semifinals. Next, Spain against Brazil. Brazil are always favorites to win the World Cup, and they have been since 2002, but they still haven't done it since then. seemingly inevitably they lose against some European team in the quarterfinals, and I mean, Spain could very well inflict such a defeat on Brazil again. But I can't help but think that this is Brazil's year, because they are just been so good, even better than usual by Brazilian standards in the qualifiers. And Spain they're really good, obviously, and they're still improving. But I think that Brazil are a bit further in their development, and that things will click for them, and they will beat Spain. Next, I mean, some of you have probably been looking at this match for a long time, England against Denmark. I gotta be honest. I just think Denmark are straight up better than England right now, which honestly is maybe not a crazy unpopular opinion, but I'm sure it's controversial to some people. But I think Denmark would just get a routine 1-0 win, nothing disastrous. Matches between England and Denmark tend to be low scoring, so I think it will just be a single goal. Maybe Mikael Damsgaard will score another free kick like he did at the Euros, but yeah, 1-0 Denmark is what I'm gonna go with. England are kind of in shambles, but maybe the tide will turn. I wouldn't count on it though. Croatia, Portugal. Croatia was better than Portugal in the Nations League, though by a small margin. I mean, Portugal really should be in the final, the finals, but they choked against Spain on the last match day. But Portugal is a bit of a boogie team for Croatia. I mean, for example, it was a while ago, but Euro 2016, it's might not matter now, but you get the idea. And also the the Nations League season prior to this one, they defeated Croatia home and away. And Portugal, they're one of those teams that once they get going, they're really good. So I think that round of 16 triumph over Serbia would give them the focus and motivation necessary to beat this good Croatian team in an entertaining 3-2 affair. The first semi-final, on the other hand, is unfortunately not as entertaining of an affair, because I predict it's going to finish 0-0 with Brazil winning on penalties. I know that Argentina has won the two most recent matches against Brazil. They won the Copa America, so that's a tournament, I guess. I don't know why. I just my gut is still saying Brazil, because it's not like Argentina demolished them. There were really close encounters, so the tide could just easily turn. I mean, this is a complete toss-up basically, and my gut is saying Brazil, so that's what I'm gonna go with. Now the other semifinal, Denmark against Portugal. I mean, it's a World Cup final at stake, so I don't think it's gonna be too blessed with goals either. I think Denmark are a bit worse on paper. To be fair, I would argue they are slightly better managed. But I mean, as I touched upon in the quarterfinals, Portugal, when they get going, they can do really well, and I think they will just find that single goal to reach their first World Cup final ever. The third place playoff cannot be neglected, even though you of course want to get into the final. 2-1 Argentina, a close, a respectable win. Denmark are good, but I think Argentina are just hope. Did you hear that voice crack? I hope not. Argentina should be able to get a narrow win, because they are just that good, even though I rate Denmark as one of the best teams in Europe right now. Yeah, on to the final. Brazil. I think Brazil is going to do it narrowly, 1-0. Finals tend to be low scoring. The 2018 World Cup final was kind of an exception to that, so I wouldn't count on its happening again at this World Cup. So 1-0 Brazil. I think they are a bit better, more cohesive. I guess slightly better on paper, but honestly that's up for debate. Portugal are also really good, but I think Brazil will just edge it out 1-0 and win their first World Cup title in 20 years. I think the drought will finally end. And as I promised earlier in the video, let's move on to the individual awards. Alright, first things first, keep in mind that these award predictions are based on how I think the tournament will turn out, which is why you might think there are some obvious names missing, especially among the honorable mentions. For example, I don't have Courtois as an honorable mention for the best goalkeeper, which might just seem really stupid, but that's just because I think Belgium will be eliminated in the round of 16. So, I mean, if Belgium make it farther, I would definitely have Courtois as a contender. But based on my predictions that I have as of now, I don't think his inclusion is necessary. But yeah, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get into the predictions, which, well, you can already see them, so now you're going to hear my explanation. I mean, Mitrovic, 5 goals. Don't at me. I mean, if Mitrovic plays, Mitrovic scores. I can definitely see him getting a hat-trick against Cameroon, which is why I included that in my predictions. And I mean, the top goal scorer, it isn't always blatantly obvious. So I thought it was kind of fun to sort of throw in a spicy prediction, but it's not exactly out of the realm of possibility, because I mean, Mitrovic just scores a lot of goals for Serbia. The honorable mentions, yeah, you can see them for yourself. I'm not gonna tear through them when you can just read them, right? Best player, admittedly, I'm playing it a bit safer with Neymar. It could just as easily be a Richarlison or Rafinha, or I guess any of the other names, but I'd favor Richarlison and Rafinha over any of the other honorable mentions. But I did go with Neymar because he is their most talismanic player, and I mean, I trust my guts, I guess. Best young player, Vinicius Junior is what I went with. His fellow countryman Rodrigo is also an honorable mention, as is Vlahovic, and I mean, Fati, Gavi, and Xavi, Pedri, 3 Spanish players. I mean, yes, Spain, they don't really, their future is looking pretty bright, to put it mildly. All right, best goalkeeper, I went with Martinez. He's an impeccable piece of Argentina's national team, instrumental. And the reason I chose him over Alisson or Ederson is because I'm not sure one of them will play at the World Cup. I think if they take turns playing matches, I don't think either of them will win, because you really need to play every match as a goalkeeper to win that award. Which is why if either of them play every Brazilian match, I think that player will win it. But because I think they will be cycled, I am going to go with Martinez. Sa of Portugal and Schmeichel of Denmark are also honorable mentions. Speaking of Denmark, I think they will win the Fair Play Award. Thanks a lot for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.